Hey everybody, it's PartyElite, and today we're taking a look at the upcoming theme park management game, Planet Coaster 2. The lovely folks over at Frontier Developments invited me to a digital event where I was able to spend a couple hours in an early build of the game so I could take it for a spin and share some of my gameplay footage and overall impressions. If you have any thoughts or questions as you watch this video, please don't hesitate to drop them in the comments below, and I'll try and answer all that I can. Bear in mind, as you're watching this video, that it is an early build of the game, so you're likely to see the occasional bug here or there and numbers that might still get tweaked, etc, etc. Also bear in mind that I wasn't really playing with any particular objective other than to futz around with all the tools and see how the game feels, so don't expect some grand, intricate construction out of this video. Instead, we'll do an overview of what's got me excited for the upcoming game, and we'll do so from the perspective of somebody who might not have played any of the game's predecessors, so you're not left in the dark with assumptions about what you may or may not already know. There'll be plenty of time for my creative machinations when the game releases later this year. So, without further ado, and with timestamps down below, let's dive in. Management meets creativity. I think it's well worth noting that Planet Coaster 2 remains a blend of grounded management game, asking you to really plan your approach and think about your operations, and almost no-holds-barred creative building capabilities that allow you to do all kinds of zany things while still remaining grounded in realistic constraints. You won't be strapping jet engines to your roller coasters, but you will be able to build them and the spaces around them in often implausible ways. If you've played previous games from the franchise, some of this will seem familiar to you. There are some massive improvements and changes that have been made that you'll really want to know about too. While there is a sandbox mode that frees you up from most limitations, the standard gameplay modes will ask you to pay attention to a variety of crucial considerations. There's a whole tech tree to progress through to keep your parks on the cutting edge. You'll have the option to engage in advertising specific aspects of your park to draw specific crowds, and you'll sometimes find your cursor hovering over the loan buttons as things get desperate. Maybe you invested heavily in the most amazing pool the world has ever seen, only to be hit by a prolonged cold and rainy season when nobody wants to actually partake in water park activities. It'll be a while before you make your money back, but your old pals at the bank will surely help you through these tough times. And yes, weather is absolutely a consideration for your guests and for you as a park manager. All that aside, you'll be balancing the price of admission for different age groups versus pass holders, while also keeping an eye on the cost of individual ride tickets, food and drink, and other facilities as well, all having an impact on guest happiness and willingness to actually part with the money you're trying to take from them. Separately, you'll have to handle hiring and firing of staff, keeping an eye on their needs, salaries, morale, and even their schedules and work areas as they go from responsibility to responsibility, with janitors, engineers, mascots, and vendors handling everything from trash pickup to ride maintenance to guest entertainment and more. And when you're not keeping an eye on the needs and wants of your staff, you'll investigate your guests' various tastes and preferences, covering a spread of dietary restrictions and looking to build experiences for all types. The ones with no fear, the ones with too much fear, the ones who have stronger or weaker stomachs, different tolerances for waiting in line for heights and speeds and g-forces, so on and so forth. Building to their tastes will keep guests engaged, and using the various overlays, you can keep an eye on more specific needs like hunger and thirst, the washroom, so on and so forth. Happier guests stick around for longer, and so they spend more money. They're going to ride more rides, they're going to eat more food, they're going to maybe take home a souvenir, and ultimately, this will help your park's overall rating and reach, which in turn will bring in more guests, which in turn will bring in more money. There are a few factors that impact your park's rating, of course. Each ride has a prestige rating determined by the overall experience guests are getting from the ride, the quality of its decorations, and its overall reputation. And all the individual ride prestige levels add up to determine your park's overall attraction prestige. The general level and quantity of decoration you've placed around your park will also have an impact on your park's rating, alongside the number of unique attractions you've got at any given time and the general reputation of your park, as a sum of how happy your guests are. The weakest aspect of your park weighs most heavily when it comes to determining your overall park rating, which I guess is an accurate reflection of how people tend to be a lot more vocal about negative experiences than positive ones. There are finer points of management, of course, and we'll touch on some of those as we go on, but the other aspect of these games that has always worked nicely in tandem with the level of management involved is the creative side. Not only is Planet Coaster bringing back its extremely versatile building tools, it's improving on them in some pretty significant ways. The simple act of placing paths has seen a massive improvement, and this was actually one of my main gripes with previous games in the franchise. The tool was always a little finicky, and while you still have access to the old way of laying paths out, you can now also simply draw out shapes to designate entire areas as paths in all sorts of funky shapes instead. What's more, you can then place buildings directly onto these blocks of path, or otherwise connect regular paths and queue paths to them, opening up some really nice options for your food courts, your shopping areas, and just generally allowing for many more approaches to planning out your layouts. I know it sounds minor, but it's such a great quality of life improvement that also has creative implications. Similarly, the object placement tool has seen a small but significant improvement too. You can now scale assets up and down. Any of you that watched my Planet Zoo videos will probably remember me wishing time and time again for this exact option, and now it's finally here, and boy am I glad for it. So, apart from being able to move and rotate these decorative objects in all directions and angles, you'll now also be able to make them significantly larger or smaller than the default size. This gives you a ton more flexibility and creativity when it comes to decorating your park, your vendor stalls, and literally anything else your heart desires. There's still also a grid-based construction system for placing buildings and building parts like walls, roofs, doors, etc., but the free-form construction remains one of the most powerful creative tools I've ever seen in any management game, and there are already an overwhelming number of pieces at your disposal to build with. Apart from sort of generic pieces, there are themed sets as well, with the game launching with themes for classical mythology, Pacific Island holiday resort vibes, and a more modern Planet Coaster brand too, leaving plenty of room for additional themes to be added for free and as DLC down the line. And of course, if building complex structures one piece at a time isn't for you, you'll have access to blueprints provided by the devs and the community too. This is all well and good, but of course, one of the biggest expressions of creativity in a game like this comes from the ability to customize rides, and as with Planet Coaster, the options here go beyond simply swapping out color palettes and ticket prices. The water features. Let's talk about rides by first talking about the big new thing that's coming with Planet Coaster 2. You can now build Waterparks and water park related items. This is an absolutely massive addition to the game, with a bunch of smaller parts making for a much greater whole. The most basic part of a water park is the pool, so let's start there. As with everything else, you can always just pop down presets provided by the base game or blueprints shared by other members of the community. Just make sure you have enough money and space and you're golden. But for those interested in a more custom approach, the toolset on hand is absolutely fantastic. There are some limitations that you'll have to work around as you build your custom pools, namely the maximum length, but otherwise it's a very free-form experience, allowing you to use a line tool, a polygon building tool, and preset shapes to define the overall shape of the pool, alongside tools that let you round corners or adjust points that you'd like to shift around, so on and so forth. You're able to determine the depth of the pool too, from wading to diving to swimming, and from my understanding, a single pool can have different depths within it, as you'd expect from a real-life pool. So you can either make a pool that transitions from wading to diving, or you can keep them separate for different experiences for your guests. The area just around the water is defined as a path, and guests can walk freely around these path areas just like any regular path in the rest of your park. You're also able to expand these path areas as you would with regular paths, meaning you can build poolside dining options or even place facilities in a seamless way. And yes, you'll need specific facilities for pools. The changing room comes most readily to mind. A small building that guests must visit before they can participate in water park activities, it can be a real bottleneck for popular pool attractions, and it becomes a serious consideration right away. But that's not all. The introduction of pools and water-based attractions brings with it the need to keep these spaces clean. When the water suddenly gets a little warm, you want to make sure the filters are operating at full efficiency. So you'll need to establish water pumps and distributors and connect them to ensure there's a constant flow of fresh, clean, chlorinated water free of pee for your guests to dip into. Yeah, when I was talking about water getting warm, by the way, I wasn't referencing weather features that are also in the game. I'm talking about the need for water filtration, is what I'm talking about. Pumps of different sizes and styles will have different output, and so even though you're able to connect multiple distributors to one pump, you'll eventually need to build out networks of pumps and distributors and hire a large staff of mechanics to help maintain them. Some rides and facilities require power too, so going on a slight tangent, just want to mention this because it works in a similar way where generators of various kinds are able to provide varying levels of power that then gets distributed through distributors that you connect manually using cables. These cables and pipes are all invisible and don't interfere with gameplay and object placement, but they do have a cost to them, and they give you a bit more control over how these small details work. Back on track though, once you've ensured the guests are able to change into swimsuits, keeping a pool clean is optional, but as you can imagine, highly recommended. Similarly, prioritizing pool safety is optional, but also highly recommended. Hire lifeguards and place observation points for them to keep an eye on any incidents that might negatively impact the health of your guests and, as a result, the reputation of your park. Then there are the extras that you can add in to help bolster the overall prestige and attraction level of a pool. Interesting layouts are all well and good, but dropping down props, including some of the really awesome, intricate blueprints, will bring the spaces to life for your guests and yourself. You'll also be able to use the previously mentioned prop placement tools to create all kinds of experiences for your guests, all while improving, for example, the scenery rating of the pool. These are familiar concepts to people who played Planet Coaster and Planet Zoo, but I just wanted to mention that yes, those same concepts apply here. Naturally, there are certain objects unique to the pools as well. Floaties can be placed as you please, wave generators need to be attached to wall sections underwater, lounge chairs can be placed just outside of the water. There's a decent selection of pool-dedicated options, and you can tell that this is ripe for expansion down the line too. And this isn't the only water-related element. No water park or pool is complete without a flume or two. And here, again, you have the option of using pre-built structures, community-built structures, or custom building tools. It's worth noting that flumes are considered separate experiences from the pools they drop people into. So when it comes to managing ticket prices, prestige, power supply, reputation, guest throughput, so on and so forth, you're managing completely separate things. This also means that when you're building a flume to drop people into a pool, it doesn't actually have to be attached or even in close proximity to the target pool. You can see me poking around with a ludicrously high flume here, bringing guests into the pool from across the path. Now, the height probably means that most guests are going to opt out of using this flume because, again, remember, guests have preferences on that front, but it was still a fun experiment. I guess I should mention here again that I wasn't really looking to build something particularly aesthetically pleasing or functional or digging into the building of any particular style of ride or space here. I just wanted to get a feel for the new and improved tools and systems so I could speak to them. But based on my time with the game and my previous experience with the series, it's very clear just how much time you can spend building really cool themed experiences for your guests with the intuitive building tools allowing for any kind of structure, shape, and combination of special sections too, of which there are plenty. Naturally, you need to keep speed and gravity in mind, and testing flumes will often reveal when you're not generating enough speed to clear the thing and actually get into the water. But overall, it's fun work to build the track, integrate special bits and pieces, build decorative elements over top of them, and then open it up for the guests to rake in the cash and also just see them have a good time. Different kinds of flumes will have different limitations, both in terms of how quickly they can drop or turn, but also in terms of which segments are available to them. Full tubes versus transparent sections versus banked corners, and more. There's a good variety to pick from, and I'm sure there's room for more bits and pieces to be added here. All in all, the addition of water park and water park related elements has clearly been quite the undertaking, and the results are fantastic. What's more, I can very confidently say that this could not have been DLC for Planet Coaster. So much has been reworked from the ground up, not just for the pools and the water park related elements, but also for example, how pathing works. And this is not the kind of stuff that you can retrofit into an old game very easily. So I can see why, yes, this was deserving and needing of a sequel. So it's great to see that justification immediately as I dove into the game and its new features. I'm really glad that pools and flumes are considered separate entities. I'm already itching to get back in to sort of build cool, customized thematic spaces and narrative experiences for my guests. I really like the options that are available with these water park features. It's really well done. Naturally though, with a name like Planet Coaster, you're not just going to be building pools and flumes. So let's take a quick moment to discuss the coasters. If you've played Planet Coaster, a lot of this will feel like familiar territory, but I'm not about to talk about my first experience with Planet Coaster 2 and completely ignore its namesake, of course. As with pretty much everything else, There's a decent selection of pre-built coasters you can simply pay the price for and plop down, and, of course, there's also the option to use blueprints that other members of the community have shared. If you want to flex your own engineering and creative muscles, though, the first step is to select the type of coaster you'd like to build, as unlocked through research over time. I believe quite a few of these coaster types overlap with what was available in Planet Coaster, while others are new. But all in all, you're looking at different kinds of experiences for your guests and wildly different capabilities to go with them. Some coasters aren't allowed to invert, for example. Some have limitations as to which age groups can ride them. Some are launched using hydraulics, some use chain lifts, some use splash sections, some are built to go forward one way and then reverse to return to the station, some... You get the idea. If there's a kind of coaster technology out there, chances are it's represented in Planet Coaster 2, including a variety of special sections, limitations, and options to go with them. In particular, there's a fairly broad range of angle limitations that will impact exactly what you can and cannot do when you're building out the tracks. Some coasters are capable of sheer vertical drops, for example, while others, not so much. Even then, as you're building out the tracks, you need to be careful about things like G-force limits and people's desire to participate in or avoid near-death experiences. For example, I made this coaster just a little too wild for my guests, and my attempts at making it less scary by adding giant plumes of fire right at the start didn't seem to help, so nobody actually rode this expensive monstrosity. Here, again, the tools are very intuitive. You can always go back and make adjustments if you desire, even after the ride's been open for the first time. Also, as with everything else we've talked about today, you'll be able to add decorative elements in, on, and around your coasters. So if you want to create a whole experience with visual effects, underground sections, sections that go over and under other coasters, that's all open season. While I fiddled with a couple of coasters in the limited time I had, I wasn't able to explore the multiverse coasters that seem to have some particularly interesting parts, based on the description. Drops and turntables, both parts that I think we've seen in the recent trailer. The spinning coasters also have interesting parts that allow for the cars to spin freely, which sounds both nauseating and fun. All in all, there's a wide selection here, and it seems like designing specific coasters for each of the types of coasters is going to be its own kind of fun. Again, not an entirely new concept for fans of the first game, but still something worth investigating. The game modes. During my time with the game, I was able to play a single mission from the career mode and then spend some time in the game's Sandbox mode building without limitations on the taiga biome. There isn't too much to say here, to be honest. The career is going to have a loose narrative thread where you lead an operation with a pun-tastic name from challenge to challenge, with each level asking you to do multiple tiers of objectives to acquire, looks like, 4 levels of completion, presumably bronze, silver, gold, and perhaps platinum? The mission we had split the map into 2 parts, partially owned by a competitor, and it asked us to perform specific tasks on his side while taking a more free-form approach on our own. Of course, we had to keep an eye on finances and guest needs and all that good stuff to complete the objective, but all in all, it was pretty standard fare, and I can see how this mode can be expanded upon over time with new missions and objectives. It'll probably be more a way to learn the game for anybody who's coming to Planet Coaster for the first time through Planet Coaster 2. Clearly, we're dealing with different biomes and the resulting weather and subsequent needs guests will have as a result, but what's most important to me is the inclusion of a franchise mode, similar to Planet Zoo, where you run your own company across the world, blending the free-form nature of Sandbox gameplay with the management considerations of career mode. It's my favorite mode in Planet Zoo, and it's how I most enjoy these kinds of games. It gives me just the right amount of freedom and constraint to have a good time. I'd be curious to see how Planet Coaster 2 implements the mode. In Planet Zoo, there were 2 levels of currency, one that only applied to any given zoo, and one that you could use between your zoos to, for example, acquire animals. Planet Zoo also allowed you to trade animals between zoos within your franchise. This meant that you could give a new zoo a bit of a jump start with the help of a prior zoo. It added a great deal of longevity to the game, beyond DLC and added content. I'm curious what the equivalence would be here, and what would carry over between parks. That aside, I'm also curious what, if anything, can be traded with other franchises. Again, using Planet Zoo as a point of reference, you could always trade your animals on an open market with other players who are also playing franchise mode in order to make that second global franchise currency. And again, it just added another layer of gameplay. I'm not sure how that kind of thing transfers to a game about roller coasters, and water parks, but that's for the creative minds at Frontier to figure out and for us to enjoy. There's obviously a ton more to talk about and show. I wasn't able to check out all the biomes, and I wasn't able to see the tracked rides, and we've only had a glance at the flatland rides too. Don't hesitate to subscribe to this channel if you want to stay up to date with Planet Coaster 2, as I definitely plan on checking the game out on the lead up to and after launch. If you found this video informative, don't hesitate to hit that like button and let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I can't wait to get my hands on Planet Coaster 2 again, but in the meantime, check out the video linked on screen right now to see what other exciting games are releasing later this year. Apart from that, as always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. They'll keep us alive and running smoothly. And of course, a big ol' thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.